"Look under the car," a homeless black girl shouted. The millionaire frozen at what he saw. The rain was falling steadily on the city streets, turning them shiny and reflective like glass. Cars splashed through puddles, honking at each other as people hurried along the sidewalks under their umbrellas. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and coffee from the streetside cafes. In the middle of all this movement, a black luxury SUV rolled slowly to a stop at the curb. Its windows were tinted, hiding the face of the person inside. From inside the car, Richard, a millionaire businessman in his late 40s, glanced at his watch impatiently. He had been driving across town for an important meeting, thinking about contracts, investors, and stock prices. Everything in his life seemed planned, organized, and calculated. The streets, however, had a life of their own, messy, unpredictable, and chaotic, and Richard often ignored it. Today was no different. He opened the car door and stepped onto the wet pavement. His polished shoes made a soft, squelching sound as he walked. He adjusted his expensive coat and looked around. People moved past quickly, keeping their heads down. Most avoided eye contact, lost in their own worlds. Richard was used to this. To him, the city was a stage, and he was an actor moving purposefully across it. Suddenly, a voice pierced the usual city noise. It was sharp, clear, and urgent. "Look under the car!" Richard stopped dead in his tracks. His first reaction was irritation. How dare someone shout at him like that? He turned toward the voice, expecting to see a troublemaker, perhaps a street performer or someone begging for money. Instead, his eyes fell on a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her clothes were torn and soaked from the rain. Her hair was messy, sticking to her cheeks, and her small shoes were caked with mud. Yet, despite everything, her eyes were bright, alert, and filled with determination. Richard frowned. This child was clearly homeless, maybe living on the streets, but there was something unusual about her. She wasn't scared of him, and she wasn't crying. Instead, she stood with her small fists clenched, shouting again, "Please look under the car." Richard hesitated. His life had taught him to ignore the unexpected, to stay focused on what mattered: his business, his meetings, his plans. Street children, animals, or random events were distractions. But something in her voice, the urgency and the hope mixed together, made him pause. He bent slightly and looked under the shiny black SUV. For a moment he saw nothing, just the dark space beneath the car, wet pavement, and reflections of passing headlights. He straightened up, thinking maybe this girl was playing a trick. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice sharp but controlled. "Look under the car, please," she repeated louder this time. Her small frame trembled, partly from the cold and partly from the fear that he might not listen. Richard felt a strange pull inside him. Something told him not to ignore her. He knelt down carefully and peeked under the SUV again. His eyes widened. At first, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Beneath the car, huddled together, were tiny puppies, barely alive. Their small bodies shivered uncontrollably from the cold and rain. Their fur was wet and dirty, and they looked scared and fragile. Richard's heart skipped a beat. He had seen many things in his life: numbers, contracts, lawsuits, and even the occasional tragedy reported in the newspapers, but nothing like this. These little creatures, so small and helpless, needed someone to help them immediately. The girl, seeing his reaction, moved closer and gently pulled one of the puppies out from under the car. Her hands were filthy, but she handled it with extreme care. She wrapped it in the sleeve of her jacket and whispered softly to calm it down. Richard watched, frozen, unable to look away. The sight struck him deeply. He realized that this child, living with almost nothing, was showing more courage and compassion than most people he knew, including himself. He felt a mix of emotions he wasn't used to: shock, admiration, and even guilt. He had spent his life accumulating wealth and success, yet here was a child who had nothing, yet acted with incredible kindness and bravery. The girl looked up at him, her eyes meeting his. There was no fear in her gaze, only hope. "They'll die if no one helps them," she said urgently. Her voice was small but carried a weight that made Richard pause. He nodded slowly. Words failed him. Instead, he reached out and helped her carefully lift another puppy. The rain continued to pour, soaking them both, but neither seemed to care. They worked together silently, their hands gentle, trying to save as many as they could. Richard noticed the way she spoke to the puppies, softly and patiently, as if she were talking to little friends. She cleaned their faces with a piece of cloth she found in her pocket and checked if their tiny bodies were warm enough. He watched her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. This child, living on the streets, could survive hardship and still show immense kindness. Finally, after a few minutes, they had rescued all the puppies. The girl wrapped them carefully in her jacket and held them close. She shivered, but her face had a small, satisfied smile. Richard, still kneeling, looked at the scene and felt a deep sense of respect. He realized that real courage and compassion were not about money, status, or power. They were about actions, even in the smallest moments. "Thank you for showing me," he said slowly, his voice breaking slightly. The girl looked at him curiously. She didn't smile yet, but she nodded faintly. Words were not needed between them. The experience itself, shared in silence, had created a connection that was rare and powerful. Richard reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. He called a local animal rescue, explaining the situation and asking them to come immediately. The girl watched him, her eyes bright with hope. She had been on her own for a long time, learning to survive every day, but now someone with the means to help had listened. As they waited, Richard sat beside her under the small shelter of the SUV, talking quietly, trying to make her feel safe. She told him about the streets, about how she had learned to be brave, and about her love for animals. Richard listened carefully. Every word she said made him think about his own life, about how much he had, yet how little he truly appreciated it. By the time the rescue workers arrived, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The puppies were handed over to the professionals, and the girl watched as they were carefully taken away. She held Richard's hand briefly, a small gesture of trust and gratitude. Richard felt a warmth in his chest he had never felt before, a feeling that money could never buy. Even as he returned to his car, preparing to continue his busy day, Richard knew this encounter had changed something inside him. He had seen the courage, resilience, and kindness of someone who had almost nothing, and it had left a lasting impression. He looked at the girl one last time, determined to do something meaningful with the rest of his day, and perhaps with the rest of his life. The city continued to move around them, people hurrying past, oblivious to the small miracle that had happened under the black SUV. But for Richard and the little girl, the moment was unforgettable, a reminder that compassion can appear in the most unexpected places, and that even one act of attention can save lives and change hearts. Richard stood in the drizzle, watching as the little girl held the puppies. Tightly against her chest, he could feel her tiny hands trembling under the wet jacket, and he realized that even though she appeared brave and fearless, she was cold, tired, and had been struggling alone for a long time. There was something about her courage that made him stop and reflect on his own life. He had grown up with everything he needed, surrounded by comfort and privilege, yet here was a child who had survived the streets with nothing but her courage and determination. The girl's eyes met his, and for a moment, Richard felt the full weight of her life story without even hearing a word. He could see it in her gaze, the countless nights spent under cold skies, the hunger, the fear, and yet the stubborn spark of hope that refused to be extinguished. She had fought for survival, but she had not lost her humanity. She had saved these puppies not because she had to, but because her heart would not allow her to look away. Richard knelt down beside her, careful not to startle her. "They're going to be okay now," he said softly. His voice sounded different to him, gentler, almost unrecognizable. The girl glanced at him, unsure whether to trust his words. She had learned that promises could be broken, that adults often spoke without meaning. But something in the way he said it, with genuine concern and calm patience, made her relax slightly. Who are you?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the dripping rain. "My name is Richard," he replied. I want to help." The girl looked at him with wide eyes, a mix of surprise and caution. "Help," she repeated. She had heard the word many times before, but it had rarely meant anything real. Most people walked past, some gave her coins, some ignored her completely. But help. Truly helping someone like her was rare. "Yes," Richard said, taking a deep breath. "I mean it. I don't just want to save the puppies, I want to help you too, if you let me." The girl's grip on the puppies tightened. She had learned to survive by being careful, by not trusting strangers. Yet there was something about Richard's presence that felt different. He didn't seem afraid, angry, or condescending. He didn't look at her like she was invisible or like she was a problem to be solved. He looked at her like she mattered, like she had worth. For the first time that day, the girl allowed herself to hope. She didn't speak for a few moments, simply looking at him, studying his face. Finally, she nodded slowly. "My name is Maya," she said. I don't have anywhere to go. Richard nodded, understanding immediately. I can imagine it's not easy, he said. No child should have to live like this. His voice carried genuine sorrow, and Maya could sense it. She had encountered many adults who spoke of compassion but never acted, but Richard seemed different. They walked together toward the curb, Richard staying close but giving Maya space. The city around them continued to move, taxis honking, people rushing by under umbrellas, neon signs flickering in the wet light. Yet in that small bubble around them, the rain seemed softer, almost protective. Maya clutched the puppies as Richard talked gently, asking her about their health, where she found them, and how she had survived on the streets. She hesitated at first, unsure whether to share so much, but he listened without judgment, letting her tell her story in her own words. She spoke of nights spent in alleyways, of rummaging through trash to find food, of sleeping in abandoned buildings when it was too cold to stay outside. She talked about the fear of being alone, the hunger, and the loneliness. Richard listened quietly, feeling a deep ache in his chest. He had known discomfort and struggle, yes, but he had never faced life with nothing, with no one to care for him. The bravery and resilience Maya showed humbled him. "You've been very brave," he said finally after she paused to catch her breath. "I admire that. Most people would have given up a long time ago, but you keep going. That's incredible." Maya looked down, embarrassed by the praise. "I don't have a choice," she admitted. "I have to survive. There's no one else to do it for me." Richard understood. He had spent so much of his life controlling circumstances, making decisions, and building security for himself. But he had never had to rely solely on courage and determination to live another day. He realized that Maya's life was filled with a strength that money and comfort could never teach. As they waited for the animal rescue to arrive, Richard noticed how resourceful Maya was. She had used an old, torn jacket to keep the puppies warm, found a piece of cardboard to create a small, dry space, and even carefully cleaned their fur with water from a puddle. Her ingenuity, born from necessity, amazed him. Every small act of care showed her intelligence and compassion. Finally, the animal rescue workers arrived, bringing boxes, blankets, and medical supplies. Richard introduced Maya to them, explaining that she had found the puppies and saved their lives. The workers were impressed, and they quickly took the puppies inside to warm them up, feed them, and check their health. Maya watched, her eyes bright with relief, as each tiny puppy was carefully placed on a soft blanket. Richard knelt down again beside her. "You did something amazing today," he said. "These puppies are alive because of you." Maya smiled faintly. I just wanted to help them," she said softly. "I couldn't leave them there." Richard reached out and touched her shoulder gently. "That's true courage," he said. "Most people would walk by, but you acted. That's what matters." For a moment, silence fell between them. The city moved around them, busy and noisy, but in that moment it felt like time had slowed. Richard felt a deep sense of connection with Maya, not just because she saved the puppies, but because she reminded him of something he had almost forgotten: the power of kindness, empathy, and courage. He decided then that he wanted to do more than just help the puppies. He wanted to help Maya too, but he knew he had to be careful. She had lived a life of mistrust and hardship. He couldn't simply offer her money or a home and expect her to accept it. He had to show her that he cared, that he could be trusted. "Do you want to get something warm to eat?" he asked gently. "There's a cafe just around the corner." Maya hesitated. She wasn't used to being offered real help, especially not by someone like Richard, but the kindness in his eyes, the sincerity in his voice made her feel safe. "Okay," she whispered. They walked together through the wet streets. Richard offered her his coat to keep her warm. She held it tightly, feeling the fabric against her skin and realizing that someone genuinely cared for her well-being. It was a small thing, but for Maya it meant the world. Inside the cafe, the smell of fresh bread, coffee, and hot chocolate filled the air. Richard ordered food for both of them, and Maya sat quietly, taking in the warmth. The small gestures, a plate of food, a dry seat, and a kind word, felt extraordinary to her. For the first time in a long while, she felt safe, seen, and valued. Richard watched her eat, feeling a sense of satisfaction and responsibility. He realized that wealth alone could not solve every problem, but it could provide opportunities, protection, and hope. And maybe, just maybe, he could use his resources to make a real difference in someone's life. As they finished their meal, Richard suggested, "Would you like me to help you find a safe place to stay tonight?" Maya's eyes widened. She had heard promises before, but this one felt different. She nodded slowly, trusting him more than she had trusted anyone in a long time. The two of them stepped out of the cafe, the rain now reduced to a soft drizzle. Richard helped Maya put on his coat again and led her to a nearby shelter he knew would take her in for the night. As they walked, he couldn't help but think about the day's events. A small, desperate voice had led him to a group of tiny puppies and a child who needed help more than anything else. And in doing so, it had opened his heart in a way that business deals, money, and success never had. For Maya, the day had been a mixture of fear, hope, and survival. She had saved lives and had finally experienced someone offering help without expecting anything in return. She realized that the world wasn't entirely cruel, that kindness could exist even in the busiest, coldest city streets. By the time they reached the shelter, night had fallen. Lights glowed softly inside, welcoming them. Maya stepped in carefully, holding the puppies close, and looked back at Richard. "Thank you," she whispered. Richard smiled, a warmth spreading through his chest. "You've already done the hard part," he said. "Now let's make sure the rest of it gets a little easier." And as they entered the shelter together, the city continued to move outside. But for Richard and Maya, a new chapter had begun. One that promised hope, care, and the possibility that even small acts of courage and kindness could change lives forever. After that rainy afternoon, Richard could not stop thinking about Maya. He returned to his luxurious office, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls of his skyscraper, but his mind was elsewhere. The memory of her tiny hands holding the shivering puppies, her brave little voice shouting to get his attention, and the way she had faced the cold rain without fear stayed with him. He realized that the encounter had changed something in him, a sense of responsibility and purpose he had never experienced before. Richard decided he could not simply leave things as they were. Maya deserved more than a temporary shelter for the night. She deserved safety, care, and the chance to grow up in a world where she did not have to fight every day just to survive. He knew he had the resources to make a difference, but he also knew he had to approach it with patience and understanding. She had lived a life of mistrust, and any sudden gesture might frighten her or make her withdraw. The next morning, Richard returned to the shelter. Maya was there, sitting quietly on a bench with the puppies wrapped in a warm blanket. When she saw him, her eyes lit up, but she remained cautious. "You came back," she said softly, her voice a mixture of surprise and relief. "I promised I'd help you," Richard said, kneeling to meet her at eye level, "and I meant it. I want to make sure you are safe, that you have food, shelter, and everything you need to live without fear." Maya looked at him for a long moment, studying his face. She had met many adults who had said similar things, but few had followed through. Why do you care?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible. Richard smiled gently. "Because someone once helped me and I never forgot it, and because I believe no child should have to survive on the streets alone. You deserve a chance to grow, to learn, and to be happy." Maya's expression softened. She had heard words like that before, but never with such sincerity. She nodded slowly, letting herself trust him a little. It was not easy. Trust was something she had learned to guard carefully. But there was something about Richard, his calm presence, the way he listened, the absence of judgment, that made her feel safe. Over the next few days, Richard worked quietly to improve Maya's situation. He arranged for her to stay in a safe, welcoming home with caregivers who could provide food, warmth, and guidance. He also made sure she had access to medical care, clothing, and school supplies. For Maya, this was a world she had never imagined. She had always relied on herself, navigating the streets and alleyways, finding scraps of food, and avoiding danger. Now she had people who cared for her, who treated her as if her life truly mattered. Richard visited her often, not as a boss or a patron, but as a friend and mentor. They would sit together in the small garden behind the home, talking about everything and nothing, about the puppies she had saved, about her favorite games, and about her dreams for the future. Maya had never felt such freedom before, to speak and to be heard without fear. She began to open up, sharing stories of her life on the streets, the challenges she had faced, and the small victories she had cherished. One afternoon, as they sat on a bench in the garden, Maya pointed to a tiny bird struggling in the rain. "Look," she whispered. Without hesitation, she ran toward it, scooping it gently into her hands. Richard followed her, amazed by her instinct to protect even the smallest creatures. "You really care about everyone," he said softly. Maya shrugged, a small smile on her face. I've learned that everyone needs someone. Even the tiniest creatures. Her words struck Richard deeply. He realized that her compassion had not been weakened by hardship. If anything, it had grown stronger. Maya had survived the streets by being resourceful and brave, but she had never allowed her suffering to make her cold or unkind. As the weeks passed, Richard noticed changes in himself as well. His life, which had once revolved around meetings, deals, and material success, began to shift. He found joy in helping Maya and other children like her, in seeing the difference that care and attention could make. He became more patient, more empathetic, and more aware of the needs of those around him. Richard also encouraged Maya to attend school. At first, she was hesitant. She had never been inside a classroom, never sat at a desk with other children her age. She worried she would not fit in, that the other kids would judge her for being different. But with Richard's gentle encouragement and the support of her caregivers, she gradually began to attend. The first day was intimidating. The classroom was large, the other children were lively, and the teachers spoke quickly. Maya felt nervous, but she held her head high and focused on learning. She discovered a natural curiosity and intelligence that had been hidden by years of survival. She asked questions, listened carefully, and began to make friends. Richard watched from a distance, quietly proud. He knew that every small step she took toward education was a step toward a future she had never imagined for herself. One day, while walking back from school, Maya spotted a stray dog trembling in the cold. Without hesitation, she ran to it, wrapping her jacket around its small body. Richard followed, silently observing her. "You've always been like this, haven't you?" he asked softly. Maya nodded. "I can't just walk away. I've seen too much suffering." Richard smiled. "You've taught me something important," he said. "That kindness matters, that even small actions can make a big difference." Maya looked at him curiously. "What do you mean?" "I mean that saving puppies, helping animals, caring for others, it's not just about them. It changes you too. It makes the world a better place, one small act at a time." Maya thought about it for a moment, then smiled. For the first time, she felt that her struggles had purpose beyond mere survival. She could make a difference, not just for herself, but for others. As the months passed, Richard continued to support Maya in every way he could. He introduced her to mentors, tutors, and volunteers who could guide her in her studies and personal growth. He encouraged her to pursue her interests, from drawing and reading to caring for animals. Maya began to dream not just about surviving, but about building a life full of hope, creativity, and kindness. One afternoon, while working on a drawing in her room, Maya looked up at Richard and said softly, "I want to help other children too. Like me who don't have homes or food, I want to make their lives better." Richard's eyes welled up. "That's wonderful," he said. "And you can, I'll help you. Together we can reach many children and make a real difference." Maya smiled, feeling a sense of purpose she had never known. She had survived the streets, saved puppies, and found a mentor who truly cared. Now she had the chance to give back, to transform her own pain into hope and action for others. Their bond grew stronger every day. Richard learned from Maya's resilience and compassion, while Maya learned from Richard's guidance, wisdom, and unwavering support. They became a team, united by a shared understanding that kindness, courage, and determination could change lives. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the shelter's garden, Maya held a tiny rescued kitten close. "Richard," she said quietly, "I feel like my life is finally starting. I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm living." Richard nodded, his heart full. "Yes, Maya. You are living, and your life will touch so many others too." In the quiet of that moment, the city outside continued its restless pace, unaware of the transformation happening within these small, tender hearts. Maya had gone from a homeless child struggling to survive to a young girl with hope, education, and purpose. Richard had gone from a busy, distant millionaire to a compassionate mentor and protector. Together, they had found meaning in unexpected places, in rain-soaked streets, in trembling puppies, and in the courage of a little girl who refused to give up. As the night fell, Richard and Maya planned their next steps. They discussed ways to help other children, how to rescue animals in need, and how to build a network of support for those who had no one. Maya's energy and determination inspired Richard, and Richard's resources and guidance empowered Maya. It was a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. one that would continue to grow and make a lasting difference in the world. Through it all, Maya never lost her bravery, her compassion, or her determination. She faced every new challenge with courage, whether in school with the animals or in helping other children in need. And Richard never stopped learning from her wisdom, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Together, they showed that even in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving, hope and kindness could prevail. And in that small garden, under the soft glow of the evening sky, they both realized that true change begins with a single act of courage, a single moment of care, and a single decision to help. Over the next few months, Richard and Maya's lives became intertwined in ways neither of them could have imagined. The little girl who had once wandered the streets alone now had a home, education, and a chance at a future she had never dared to dream of. But even as her life transformed, Maya never forgot the streets she had lived on, the cold nights, the hunger, and the fear. She remembered the struggles not as a source of bitterness, but as a motivation, a reason to help others who were still trapped in the same hardships. Richard watched her grow with pride and admiration. He had learned so much from her, about resilience, kindness, and the strength of the human spirit. Maya had changed him too, reminding him that success was not measured in money or possessions, but in the ability to make a difference in someone else's life. Together, they began planning ways to reach other children, to help those who were homeless, hungry, or abandoned. It started small. Richard used his connections to find safe spaces for children in need, places where they could sleep, eat, and learn. Maya visited these shelters, speaking to the children, sharing her story, and showing them that even someone who had faced unimaginable struggles could find hope. The children looked up to her with wide eyes, inspired by her courage and determination. One day, as they walked through one of the shelters, a young boy approached Maya holding a small injured kitten. "Please," he said softly, "can you help him?" Maya smiled, remembering the day she had rescued the puppies. She knelt down, carefully examining the kitten and gently wrapping it in her coat. Richard helped her carry it to the nearest animal care facility, and together they ensured the little creature received proper treatment. Richard watched Maya interact with the children and animals, his heart full. He realized that her compassion was not limited by her circumstances. It was limitless, natural, and powerful. She inspired everyone around her, showing that courage and kindness could flourish even in the most difficult conditions. As the months turned into a year, Maya's transformation became evident to everyone who knew her. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever. She excelled in school, learning quickly and asking questions that revealed her intelligence and curiosity. Teachers were amazed by her dedication and her ability to focus, given the challenges she had faced in the past. She had a natural talent for leadership, and she used it to help other children, mentoring them and encouraging them to pursue their dreams. Richard, meanwhile, found a new purpose in life. His business dealings still occupied his time, but they no longer defined him. He dedicated more resources to supporting children like Maya, funding programs for education, shelters, and animal care. He also spent more time mentoring her, helping her navigate the world she had never truly experienced before. Together, they formed a partnership built on trust, respect, and shared vision. One afternoon, as they were walking through a park, Maya noticed a group of children playing near a pond. She approached them, her heart full of hope. "Hi," she said, smiling warmly. "Do you want to help me take care of some animals?" The children looked at her curiously, some shy, some excited. Maya began telling them about the puppies she had saved, about the kittens they could help, and about the importance of kindness and compassion. Slowly, the children joined in, eager to be part of something meaningful. Richard watched from a distance, a proud smile on his face. He had seen the impact Maya had on him, on the children, and on everyone who encountered her. Her courage, empathy, and determination had created a ripple effect, touching countless lives and inspiring others to act. As time went on, Maya began organizing small community events, teaching children how to care for animals, helping families in need, and spreading awareness about the importance of kindness. She worked tirelessly, but her energy never seemed to run out. Her experiences on the streets had given her strength, resilience, and a unique perspective on life. She understood struggle, but she also understood hope, and she dedicated herself to spreading both wherever she went. Richard supported her every step of the way. He used his resources to provide materials, funding, and guidance, but he also gave her something more valuable, his trust and belief in her abilities. Maya thrived under his mentorship, growing into a confident young leader who inspired everyone she met. One evening, as they sat together in the shelter's garden, Maya looked up at Richard and said, "I never imagined life could be like this. I was alone, scared, and cold. Now I feel like I can do anything, and I want to help others feel the same way." Richard nodded, his eyes misty. "You've already done more than most people do in a lifetime," he said. "You've shown courage, kindness, and determination, and now you're sharing it with the world." Maya smiled, her heart full. She had come so far from the rainy streets where she had first met Richard. She had faced fear, hunger, and uncertainty, yet she had never given up. Her life was no longer about survival alone. It was about making a difference, about creating hope, and about inspiring others to believe in themselves. As the years passed, Maya continued to grow, both in age and in impact. She remained close to Richard, learning from him and guiding him in turn. Together, they expanded their efforts, creating programs that reached more children and animals, providing education, shelter, and care to those who needed it most. Maya became a symbol of hope, resilience, and compassion, proof that even in the darkest circumstances, light could shine through. Richard often reflected on the day he first saw Maya shouting in the rain. He remembered the fear, the hesitation, and the sudden realization that he could not ignore her. That moment had changed everything, not just for Maya, but for him as well. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in money, possessions, or power, but in the ability to make a real difference in the lives of others. Maya, too, remembered that day vividly. She remembered the wet streets, the shivering puppies, and the strange man who had stopped and listened. She remembered the feeling of being seen, valued, and cared for. That experience had planted a seed of hope in her heart, and with Richard's support, that seed had grown into a life of purpose, meaning, and love. One day, as they were preparing for a community event, a young girl approached Maya, holding a small injured bird. "Can you help him?" she asked timidly. Maya knelt down, just as she had with the puppies years ago, and carefully wrapped the bird in her hands. Richard watched, recognizing the same determination and compassion he had first seen in her. The cycle of kindness continued, spreading from one life to another, growing stronger with each act of care. Maya realized that her life's mission was clear: to help those who could not help themselves, to protect the vulnerable, and to inspire courage and hope in others. She understood that life was full of challenges, but also full of opportunities to make a difference. With Richard by her side, she knew she could face anything. As they walked through the park that evening, Maya looked around at the children playing, the animals being cared for, and the families smiling. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and gratitude. "Richard," she said softly, "thank you for believing in me, for giving me a chance to live, and for helping me find my purpose." Richard smiled, his heart full. "No, Maya," he said gently. "Thank you, you've taught me more than I could ever teach you. You've shown me what true courage, kindness, and strength look like, and together we've created something that will last far beyond today." As night fell and the city lights shimmered in the distance, Richard and Maya stood side by side, watching the world move around them. They had begun as strangers, one a lonely, homeless girl, the other a busy, distant millionaire. But through a shared experience of courage, compassion, and determination, they had transformed each other's lives. Maya had found hope, safety, and purpose, while Richard had discovered the true meaning of wealth and success, the power to change lives for the better. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the laughter of children and the gentle sounds of nature, they both understood something profound. Life was unpredictable, sometimes harsh, but it was also full of opportunities to make a difference. One small act of courage, one moment of kindness, could create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. And so, Maya and Richard continued their journey together, helping those in need, protecting the vulnerable, and inspiring countless others to believe in the power of compassion and hope. The little girl who had once shouted in the rain, risking her own safety to save the puppies, had become a beacon of light in the world. And the millionaire who had stopped to listen had learned that true success is measured not in wealth, but in the lives we touch, the hope we create, and the love we share. Through every challenge, every triumph, and every small act of care, Maya and Richard proved that no matter how dark the world may seem, courage, kindness, and determination can shine brightly, transforming lives, one heart at a time. And in that transformation, they found the truest meaning of life itself.